Alright, so this video was actually kind of inspired when I was watching Geekvolution's last multi-topic extravaganza, and they were talking about memorable characters. And this is actually something I wanted to do for a while. After reading, I reread Batman Nightfall and Death of Superman, and I started thinking about something. Relevancy of supervillains. What I mean is, basically, what keeps a supervillain, fresh? What keeps them, rather than falling into obscurity after one time, with Doomsday, he killed Superman. With Bane, he broke Batman. And this also plays into a lot of other, villains. Heroes have relevancy, but usually they fall into obscurity as well. But we're here to talk about villains, because villains usually suffer from this a lot when they come back. They come in their first time around, and it's this huge meaning behind this villain, like Onslaught. During the Onslaught saga, that was a pretty damn big thing. And then when he came back, it didn't have that same effect he did, in Onslaught Unleashed. And then there was Onslaught Saga 2, which was kind of terrible. But the main thing about this video is just me talking about what keeps them, keeps the villain relevant, what keeps him memorable. That's probably a better word. So let's talk about the two biggest ones that fall into that category, Doomsday and Bane, and what sets them apart, and why personally. Now, this is just my opinion, so you don't have to, don't freak out about it, but in my opinion, Bane is a bit more memorable and relevant to current DC Comics now than Doomsday. I say this because they've managed to keep Bane interesting. They managed to do something, more interesting each time he comes back. How do you, go higher than breaking Batman? Psychologically and physically wearing down Batman to breaking not only his back but his will. How does a villain top that? Good question. I don't know. Maybe holding all of Gotham hostage with a nuclear bomb. That works. You gotta keep, it's kind of like, what's a good way to, compare this? It's kind of like, actually, keeping supervillains in their, what makes them still memorable and relevant is kind of like how you could compare a music artist making another out. He or the group, she or the group puts out this amazing first record. It comes out, everyone loves it, and it's huge. It's a top-selling album and all that. It's a top-selling album, everyone's buying it. But how do you top that? And then you kind of set yourself up to, you gotta go higher. You gotta go to the next level. You can't just be on the same level all the time. You can't be on that same level that brought you there. You gotta step your game up. And that's kind of why, someone like Bane has managed to stay memorable in some ways, because not only did he come back with a vengeance, taking Gotham hostage with a nuclear weapon is kind of a big thing. Not only that, but he also, he was the new he was going to be the new protege, the new leader of the League of Assassins. After Ra's al Ghul said, you know what, I can't get through to Batman, but I'm going to make Bane my next protege. I'm going to make him my protege now. And that kind of fell through towards the end, but that was such a cool story. I think it was called Bane of the Demon. I think that's what the story arc was called. I could be wrong, I can't remember. But, and then, they kept making Bane interesting. He was still able to fight Batman physically and mentally he could keep up with Batman. Still, and each time Batman and Bane fought, it was like to a draw. So, that was always pretty cool. And then in Secret 6, they made him awesome, sometimes most of the time he was leader of the team, and then he went off and he was forced to make his own Secret 6. That was just awesome. So, and I'm glad they keep making, you know, a lot of people still think he's pretty relevant to times. And I'm not saying Bane. It's just because I'm saying Bane is better because he's gonna get a movie and shit. It's just that the writers and creators have managed to do such interesting things with the character of Bane that it keeps me, it keeps people like, oh yeah, let's see more of Bane. Now let's talk about Doomsday. Doomsday, in my opinion, and keep in mind, guys, this is my opinion. Now, I don't outright hate Doomsday. I don't hate him. If I was ever going to do a top 10 Superman villains list, he'd be up there. He'd be on the top 10. You know, good reason. Because he killed frickin' Superman. However, Doomsday, in my opinion, keep that in mind, it's my opinion, but Doomsday never achieved that higher level. He never achieved that higher level of being a very memorable, or, you know, sometimes you guys could say recognizable villain, other than, you know, he killed Superman. You know, no one ever talks about like, people will not only talk about with Bane, I forgot to mention this, but, you know, people will go back, if you're a comic book fan at least, you'll talk about, you know, how Bane broke Batman, but I guarantee you, other people will talk about how Bane, you know, he took Gotham hostage with a nuclear weapon, how he's been part of the Secret Six, how they've managed to keep him, you know, fresh, you know, with these new ideas, and still make him like this awesome badass that when he first appeared, you know? So, yeah. But, anyway, but with Doomsday, people only remember him because, oh, it's the dude who beat the shit out of Superman. That's the only reason anyone remembers him. No one ever remembers Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey, where Doomsday was found on Apocalypse and was trying to he was actually going to take over Apocalypse. He'd actually gotten smarter and beat the shit out of Darkseid. No one ever remembers that. And then with Reign of the Doomsdays, it just, in my opinion, Reign of the Doomsdays was kind of hokey. I liked it. Now, trust me, guys, I liked Reign of the Doomsdays because I really liked that science fiction, that really kooky 60s science fiction element it had. I really liked that kind of style that Paul Cornell was going with. But on the other hand, you know, people don't really acknowledge that, and, you know, Doomsday never really... Every time you saw Doomsday, whenever he showed up again in the comics, it was like, oh, it's Doomsday. Batman's gonna... It's not like with Bane and Batman, where whenever Bane and Batman fought, it was like to a draw. With the other time Superman fought Doomsday, outside of Hunter Prey, where it was a really damn good fight in there. But in this, with Doomsday, you know, whenever Doomsday showed up, he was just another villain Superman had to take out. It became, with Doomsday, it became pretty much like kind of like just another obstacle in his way. It's like, oh, it's Doomsday, the dude who killed me. Boom, you're gone. Now, however, they have managed to do some interesting stuff, but like I said, no one remembers the other stuff Doomsday does. Like, there's a really good story in Superman Batman Search for Kryptonite where Superman battles a Doomsday made of kryptonite. And I thought that was pretty cool, but no one really brings that up. You know, people just remember... This is why people always talk about Doomsday all the time. And it's not because... It's just because he killed Superman. You know? Whenever you think... When people see... like, outside of comic books, all they know is because it was when Superman was killed by Doomsday, it was kind of a big thing in the 90s. Like, I think they put it on the news, in fact. But, yeah. Now, a lot of other villains, but like I said, you know, getting back on Doomsday, you know, he never really achieved that high of, you know, that respect. You know, he never achieved any higher than killing Superman. It's like the writers couldn't really know what to do to top that. So, that's the thing with what sets Bane apart from Doomsday, is that they managed to do other interesting things with Bane, but it was just, Doomsday was like, it's Doomsday. It's the same thing with Onslaught, you know? Onslaught in the Marvel Universe, during the Onslaught saga, took out almost the entire Marvel Universe. That was cool. And he pretty much forced the majority of the Marvel heroes to be put in like a pocket universe, and it was I don't want to get into that. But, you know, when they brought Onslaught back, it didn't have that same effect of, oh shit, it's Onslaught, this is going to be awesome. It never achieved any higher than that. It never did. Like, no one, whenever someone talks about the Onslaught Saga, it's only just the Onslaught Saga. No one ever talks about, no one really, you know, really brings up, when comic book fans talk about Onslaught, no one really brings up, you know, Onslaught, the second Onslaught Saga, or Onslaught Unleashed, you know, because, you know, Onslaught couldn't really achieve any higher than that. And that's kind of the same thing with a lot of other villains. Now, Thanos is another villain they've managed to keep relevant, you know, outside of the Infinity Gauntlet. They've managed to make him very interesting, but still, me personally, I think Thanos hasn't really broken out of, you know, just being the villain known for Infinity Gauntlet. That's the only problem I have. I mean, now, keep in mind, you know, Thanos is still one of my favorite Marvel villains, but still, I don't think he's really broken out of that, and it's sad, too, because he's such an interesting character, and I really wish they would do more with him. Now, they did do some interesting stuff with him in Thanos Imperative, and some other stuff in Annihilation, and a lot of the Marvel Cosmic stuff. But it was, you know, again, he doesn't really... I really feel bad that he doesn't break out of that. Another character that has broken out of that mold is Galactus. Now, yes, I view Galactus not as a villain, but as a force of nature. But, however, my thing applies here because how do you top, you know, trying to devour the world? Easy. You develop his character to the point where people, when they first read the Galactus trilogy, I'm going all the way back to the Fantastic Four story, the Galactus trilogy, where, you know, the first appearance of Galactus and whatnot. They managed to keep Galactus, like, Galactus, I guarantee you, if they didn't do anything interesting beyond that point, Galactus would have fallen into obscurity, and whenever Galactus would come back, it's like, oh, Galactus, that dude who from that 3-part story. But, yeah, the only thing that sets him apart, and I'm not saying Galactus is a villain, but the rule applies here because they've managed to keep him still relevant. They've managed to make him still an interesting character, so whenever you see Galactus, it's like, oh shit, it's Galactus, this is going to be awesome now. You know, they've done stuff with him in, you know, the Marvel Cosmic stuff. They did stuff with him in the Infinity Gauntlet. They did stuff with him, you know, they're currently doing stuff right now. You know, Jonathan Hickman's using him in his Fantastic Four run where he's battling the Mad Celestials. You know, that's a good point. I'll talk about another villain, and this one is not a comic book villain. This is a movie villain. Destroyah, the monster that killed Godzilla. Toho never used him again. Unlike, you know, Ghidra and Gigan, they kept reusing those monster villains, but with Destroyah, they never used him again. And that was smart, because how do you top killing Godzilla? How do you top that? You can't, really. You can't really top killing, you know, probably the icon of Japan, basically. And probably one of the biggest international icons ever. You can't really top that. So, because there was talk in Godzilla Final Wars that Destroyah was going to show up in there. Or at least a version of him. But that never happened, because they felt like because there's actually people who said, you know what, we can't use Destroyah because it wouldn't have that same effect. You know, it'd just be like Godzilla just killing off another monster. They wanted to leave Destroyah as being known as the monster who killed, because they knew they couldn't do anything higher than the monster that killed Godzilla. And this applies to a lot of other villains, you know. That's kind of like Hush. You know, Hush is another good example. Hush, when he first appeared, man, that was a good story of Batman being worn down, being mentally played with. It was mind-boggling, and then it turns out to be Batman's best friend. Now, granted, Hush Returns was god-freaking awful. Oh, that was such a bad story. But then Paul Dini got a hold of him and made Batman Heart of Hush, and that was a comeback. And then he used him in Streets of Gotham, and then he was awesome, rather than have Hush fall into obscurity and whatnot. So, yeah. Now, I could go on and on about this, but I think I pretty much said the majority of my piece on this video. But anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This was pretty fun to talk about. And, yeah. You guys tell me what you think. I'd really like to see a few video responses to this. I'm curious to know what other people think of this matter, because I hope I'm not the only one thinking about this. But anyway, guys, I'm out.